legal to do a podcast now. She's not a horse person. She's a person horse. People like to be choked. Something we like. This is the Sports City, and I'm your host, Johnny Disco. What's going on, everybody? This week we are talking to one of my good friends, Dr. Dan Fosselman, about the use of performance-enhancing drugs in sports. Dan is an integrative medicine doctor. He went to a school in Columbus called the Ohio State University, little tiny junior college. I'm pretty sure it's just like one or two buildings. He is one of the smartest dudes I've ever met. He and I went to college together and just clearly on a different level academically. He has like a master's in accounting. He is in the U.S. Army Reserves. He's just the best dude you've ever met. He is super high T, which stands for testosterone, and then also super high IQ, which is typically, that's quite rare. Typically, the higher the T, the lower the IQ. So he's truly a unique dude. So we're going to jump into the interview with Dr. Dan Fosselman right now. All righty then, ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the Sports City studio here in the Sports City Shed. My good friend, Dr. Dan Fosselman. Foss, how are you?
Exhausted, parenting, living life. How are you, my friend?
I am doing very well. Johnny Disco had another long day living the Johnny Disco life, but we've arrived to the end, and it is great to catch up with Dr. D. So as I said in my intro, everybody, Dr. Fosselman is the man. He's one of the coolest people I've ever met, and he's crazy accomplished, and I think I probably mentioned this in the intro. There's this graph which graphs intelligence versus testosterone. And up in the very top right corner, there's some freak of nature who's super high T and super high intelligence. And I think it is you, Dr. Dan Fosselman.
I appreciate it. It's probably either me or Stephen Hawking, so I'm probably headed for a wheelchair in about 5 years.
But one of those murder ball ones, and your arms are still huge, and you're just dominant. You're just always in a wheelie. It's like, oh wow, he really likes doing the wheelies. Yeah, dude, I can't wait for that chapter. So you are a doctor of integrative medicine, right?
Yeah, my background is I did medical school from an osteopathic program. Then I did a family medicine residency, sports medicine fellowship, functional medicine, anti-aging, regenerative. So when you combine all of it, the term I just use is integrative, but it's because there's no other word for it.
All right. So it's just, I mean, there was 1,000 medical words in there. So I don't know how much we want to. What is the first one? Osteo what?
So my medical degree was an osteopathic physician. The bad joke is just people who could not get into MD programs. So we do similar training to your MDs, but we do chiropractic manipulation, which makes us weirder.
Okay. So you guys are like doctors and then also kind of like traveling mystic guru types.
You got it. So it fits the personality well.
I love it. Actually, fun story about Foss. We were together when he got placed at med school. Is that how it works, Foss?
Yeah, got in. So I don't know the term, accepted into medical school.
Well, I thought it was like after, like you'd already gone to med school. It was because it was on your honeymoon out in San Francisco.
Oh, shit.
Yeah,
match for residency.
For residency. That's what it was. And it was that tiny JUCO outside of Columbus, right?
Yeah, it's the Ohio State University, the national champions.
Undoubtedly, dude. I don't know if my esteemed many and varied listeners have ever been to Columbus. There's one thing in that town, and it's the Ohio State University, and it's just building after building that's all new and cool and scarlet and gray. I mean, it's like the only thing. It's all Columbus has, which is cool.
Don't make me talk shit to you about the greatness of Columbus, Ohio.
It is a great rivalry. I spent a lot of time in Columbus, so I love Columbus, but we don't need to go too deep into with our mutual hatred for all the fans at home. Foss is an Ohio State fan. I'm a Michigan fan, so it's just a fun, it's one of those rivalries that you kind of like them. They're kind of your friends. Like, you don't hate them. It's not a hate rivalry. It's kind of a mutual respect, but you really want to win. It's almost like a sibling. It's kind of fun. We love Ohio State. We really do. My dad loves Ohio State. He's a huge Michigan fan. Script Ohio, bro. That's one of my dad's favorite things.
I remember I hadn't gone to a game a couple of years, and I went out, and it was the Penn State-Ohio State game, and when they dotted the I, it was my entire childhood flashed before my eyes, and I was just like, this is the best shit in the world. It's
This
awesome.
this is it. This is the pure gas, straight into my veins. Uh, Ohio magic. Dotting
The
that
only
I.
time I got to spend with my father was the Ohio State game. So
That was it. That was sacred time, and you didn't talk. There was no
no,
communication happening. If you were good, you got a hot dog. But that's, dude. It's so the Sports City studio and the Sports City shed is swimming with mosquitoes. So I'm just gonna be whapping them throughout the whole interview. So, all right, we talked a little bit about your medical background, but tell us a little bit about like your day to day as a doctor. Like, are you in a hospital, or how does that work?
so in September, I opened up a private concierge clinic. I still do a fair amount of cash pay regenerative medicine, so PRP. The average person is going to call it stem cell procedures, BMAC, things like that as well. So I just try to get people's musculoskeletal health improved. Do a lot of diet and nutrition education, try to come up with custom plans, improve people's performance. And a lot of times, whether it's athletes, it tends to be more business owners, entrepreneurs, just people who are trying to perform at a high level.
And so this is like it's like a, it's like a luxury doctor kind of. It's like a person who does a deep dive into your health and prescribes a very specific, like outcome oriented plan that isn't just take some drugs, right?
Correct. And the vast majority of the time it comes back to lifestyle medicine, which is like, do you actually sleep enough? Do you eat a reasonable amount of food? Do you actually exercise? And do you actually hang out with people who care about you and not just take all your money and suck your soul away from you?
Because those are definitely out there too. And sometimes I wonder if am I that, to the people that I love. One thing that caught my ear, you said stem cells. So is that like a needle? Is that how you do a stem cell?
Yeah, so stem cells is there's probably four different things that fall into that category. There's something called exosomes, there's wort and jelly products, and then the kind of conservative thing that's probably most in the literature is something called BMAC, which is bone marrow aspirate concentrate. Some people almost do a little liposuction procedure as well, and then spin down the fat cells, and you can get stem cells from that as well. You can
Mm.
use it primarily, the way I do it is for musculoskeletal treatments, but there are people out there now doing all sorts of shenanigans, IV therapies where they're injecting it directly into the veins, trying to get some sort of benefit in that environment.
Now, this is a great segue. Love it. Are stem cells, could those be used as performance enhancing drugs in sports?
Um, the short answer I'd give you is no. So some organizations do not allow IVs near a competition. So I guess if you're doing an
Mm.
IV injection of any substance, it's going to be prohibited. But most organizations or governing bodies, from a drug standpoint, would not consider that a banned substance.
Mm. Okay. Um, what are some like misconceptions people like me and the general public have about performance enhancing drugs, how they exist in sports, things like that?
So most people assume every athlete at a professional level is on performance enhancing drugs. When you've been around people that are performing at an elite level, the only way I can put this is they're probably just better than you. So especially
No,
at,
no.
in the major organizations, they are just freak athletes. So hand-eye coordination is off the charts. They're massive human beings. They tend to put on muscle mass. Um, they're just bigger, stronger, and faster, and that's with or without drugs.
So sometimes you hear the term, people say I'm built different, and I feel that way personally about myself. But is that real?
Oh yeah. I mean, the example I always use is when I was 18 years old, one of the guys I played high school football with played at Ohio State, and then one of his roommates was Cam Haywood, who
Mm.
now I think is a 13-time All-Pro, plays for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I remember meeting him at 18, and he was probably around 300 pounds, about 6'6", 6'7", massive human being. It was the first time I said, I can't believe this guy is the same species as me. So he's
Really?
insanely strong, probably faster than me, 100 pounds heavier than me. They're just different. And,
Hmm.
again, personal background, my high school linebacker coach was this guy named Andy Katzenmoyer, who was a Butkus Award winner, played for the Patriots. I think he was 6'5", 260 pounds, ran a 4.440, and was just ridiculously strong. And so when you saw that, you're like, that is an NFL athlete. And when you look around at a normal human being, that is not an NFL athlete.
Hmm. Now, do you think? Okay, so they're built different, so we know that. But then, like for instance, when we were freshmen at Denison, I we had a lifting test, and I remember at the beginning of summer we got a packet in the mail that was like, here's your lifting regimen, and it was like the test in the fall is going to be, it was our body weight bench press 10 times, dips, some other stuff. But I remember I didn't really do it. Surprise, surprise. I remember I texted one of the players on the team, was like, is this serious? And the guy was like, yes, dude, it's very serious. You need to be doing this. So I was like, but I don't, I probably weighed 180 pounds at that time. Like, I wasn't going to bench press anywhere near 180 pounds 10 times. Ever. I've never been able to put up 225. And I've gone through like very, sustained lifting regimens or, periods. Is there just like you have a different baseline for muscle regeneration and being super duper strong? Is there just like different layouts for that? Does that make sense?
I think the question you're asking is, are people built different from a strength perspective? Like genetic potential, and the answer is 100% yes. So,
Mm.
um, just for a numbers comparison, so it's geared powerlifting I'm going to reference, but I think the world record bench press right now is about 1,200 pounds in a bench shirt. Okay. And so when you think about an average adult not being able to bench 225 pounds, you're looking at 1/6 of the world record.
Mm.
So, um, that's absolutely nothing. And so for a long period of time, I thought like the average adult male, there's no reason they shouldn't be able to bench 225, but that is a reasonable goal for a lot of adult males. Like it's
Mm.
unlikely they can get over that. Um, in the literature, the person who's wrote about this probably most extensively is a guy named Greg Nuckols, and he has a article series or journal that's out there called Stronger by Science, and he has an entire series that goes over like what is a reasonable strength projection based on a bell curve. So on that, there's these clear extreme outliers, but your average guy, like yes, a 225 bench is probably respectable. If you're competing in powerlifting, that's a joke, and you should pick a different sport.
That's so crazy, dude. Because I remember there was a kid I met in high school who was like into powerlifting, and he had his like records on the wall, and it was like 135 was the warm up, and then it was like 225 was the second round, and then it was like 315, and I was like, bro, like I can't do, if you could only do 225 once, like you're never doing 315 at the same tournament. It's just like so crazy how, and he was just built for that. It was just like Ohio corn fed. Um, Speaking of Ohio corn fed and just meat, what was Mark McGuire up to? What was the whole deal? What was he doing? Was he injecting?
So at the time that he got in trouble, he was actually using an oral kind of pro-hormone. I believe he was taking androstenedione, which is just a precursor for testosterone. So in your body will convert different hormones into other ones, and a downstream hormone of that one is testosterone. Kind of gets converted through the adrenals. At the time, I think I ended up looking it up, completely legal. It was not a banned substance, and he kind of took a lot of heat from that.
Mm.
Um, so he kind of got pinned for that, and there was a lot of controversy that came as a downstream effect of him kind of breaking the home run record.
Yeah, it sucks because it was the best. I just saw a video today of him at the All Star game, the All Star Home Run Derby, and like Sosa's freaking out. Mark Glavin is going nuts. They're all just they're all so excited, and he's piping the deepest bombs out of Fenway in Boston, and it's so funny because he's just sailing it over the Green Monster into a street. So there's probably people, just getting hit with like 500-yard moonshots from Mark McGwire. So that was a pill he took. So that was just like a supplement. That is
allegedly he was probably taking injectables as well, and probably to some forms of testosterone. But the most controversy came around him taking, I believe, a pro hormone in that setting.
And are professional athletes, like, we already know they're predisposed to this path because they're super duper elite. On top of that, are they lifting a lot of weights?
Sometimes, and again, when you talk about sports, there's a power component, which is essentially how much force you can generate, and there's a strength component, and strength and power are not the same thing. And so a lot of times when people are using anabolic drugs like testosterone, they're going to put mass on that. And most sports are based on your strength to weight ratio. So more or less, if you put on too much body mass and your strength doesn't exceed that on the curve, your athletic performance might actually decline in that setting.
Interesting. So it's not just take the juice, work out super duper hard, and then pound home runs. It's a art and a science.
Yeah, I mean, baseball, there's a ton of technique. There's an art in a swing. And when you look at people like Barry Bonds and Mark McGwire, they had an elite technical swing prior to their muscular development. So they had a lot of technique developed prior to putting on the mass, which was just an amplifier of pre-developed talent.
Now, put on mass, like, he's probably eating more.
Yeah, so when you look again at the literature with testosterone, the average person puts on about 5 to 10% of lean body mass with no change in diet or exercise. So if you have a 200-pound person, they might put on about 20 pounds of lean body mass or muscle and bone if they start using drugs like testosterone at a reasonable dose. So I believe he was a taller athlete, so I wouldn't be surprised if he went from something around 200 pounds to maybe 230, 240.
That is insane. And in like a different setting, it would turn you into like a super soldier. Like, you're just super jacked. You have big, thick bones. You just gained 40 pounds and, you got high test and you could, do crazy stuff.
Agreed. I mean, I think the misconception people have is you need testosterone is the game changer for a lot of these guys. And I would say with or without anabolics, they'd be a professional athlete in either setting. And when you look at the sport that most commonly is associated with drugs, you look at competitive professional bodybuilding, like, the guys who are on the Olympia stage look better than the vast majority of people prior to them really utilizing the drug component. So, the one people talk about a lot is either Phil Heath when he was in the NFL or Ronnie Coleman prior to him really hitting the drugs. And those guys look better than you will ever look in your life before they started hitting anabolics harder.
There's a famous saying, it's everybody wants to be a bodybuilder, but nobody wants to lift this heavy-ass weight, by none other than Ronnie Coleman. And I love that you brought up Ronnie Coleman because I was going to bring him up. He's on my board here to bring up Ronnie Coleman. So, hold on. There was a time when Ronnie Coleman wasn't juicing, and then he juiced?
Correct. And I think he's spoken about that at length in his documentary. And, like, prior to him really adding on the anabolic agents, he was still extremely high level from a bodybuilding standpoint.
So he was built different and just had a anatomy that enabled him to push a bunch of weight in all capacities and lift a bunch of weight. And then, so he was doing that. And that was, do you think, like, that's just a thing that he just is a strong kid, and so he picks up bigger rocks and throws heavier rocks and has a ton of energy and just is like, those kids that are just like, that kid's a freak. It's like a little tank. You think it was like that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, again, I think the question you're asking me is, like, again, nature versus nurture. Like, how much of this is genetic versus what they did as a child? And the answer is
Hmm.
just both.
Yeah.
So, like when you look at the American population of 300 million, there are just some of the elite that are freaks genetically, and then they work their balls off and they just perform at a level that is unimaginable for most people.
Mm.
So they're wired, and then they have a innate sense of drive and just push.
Mm.
And whether their dad beat them or their parents, they were never good enough.
Mm.
They just have some internal drive that pushes them to be excellent.
That is so interesting. It's like what mix of setting and trauma results in Ronnie Coleman, and how do we repeat it? Let's get as many Ronnie Colemans. Mr. Olympia, ain't nothing but a peanut. I think about ain't nothing but a peanut every time I lift. I mean, he's iconic.
Yes, John Dion is now neglecting his daughter in order to make her an elite performer in life.
Yep. Yeah, I'm like she's asked to be picked up, and I just hand her a dumbbell. I go, no. Pick that up. All right. So some of the pros are lifting a lot. I did have a follow-up question. You said there's, you can strength versus power. Like if I'm a position player in, let's just keep it with baseball for simplicity's sake. Like I'm the shortstop. So I need to be fast and agile. I need to have a strong arm and be able to whip that thing. And then, I need to have like good vision, I guess, and good timing. Does that athlete at the professional level, if you might not, do they have like position specific training for the skills that they need to use?
Yeah, so from a strength and conditioning programming standpoint, the key thing that's going to push muscular hypertrophy is volume. So volume is weight times sets times reps, and then you just get a number.
Mm.
Okay, and as you progress that over time, generally people put on more muscle mass. When it comes to power, it's really about neurological development instead of the muscle. So usually
Wow.
that is longer rest durations, and then it's a higher intensity, meaning so intensity is, I can lift 100 pounds, training with a weight that's 90 or 95%, 90 to 95 pounds. So that's a 90 to 95% intensity. And so if you're doing that with long rest intervals, generally you can push power higher. So Olympic weightlifting, snatch, clean and press, those are more power exercise. How quickly can I develop force through it? Another power exercise would be something like the high jump or long jump. How can I generate as much force as possible through a set amount of weight? So when you talk about baseball and throwing, again, it's not like the baseball's getting heavier. It's how can I generate more force through this object that weighs the same amount of weight? So
Interesting.
you have to modify the training program. When you talked about change of direction, again, if I'm gaining body weight, that's more strength and power that I have to push to move this thing faster. So generally, they don't want to gain weight in that setting. And then when you're talking about hand-eye coordination, there's actually eye training or vision training that you can do to increase reaction time. And oftentimes that's with peripheral vision training.
Gosh, man, that's I think that's so dope. Like the idea of creating the neural pathways, Like I remember doing this lifting regimen and breaking through like PRs with deadlift, and it was this mental block. And you like forge a way through, you build a new neural pathway, and you're saying it kind of a big factor in that is rest, time in between doing things hard.
Yeah, you have to recover. And that's probably the biggest mistake I see people, or especially athletes, make, and it doesn't matter on the level, is like you get a hard training session in, then you go and drink your balls off, and you have tons of alcohol in your system, you get 3 hours of sleep, and you don't eat sufficient calories. You're not going to recover from the stimulus you provided, so you're just not going to make those progressive incremental improvements over time, no matter what you're doing from a workout perspective.
It's really consistency in rest. It's not necessarily consistency in activity. It's that if you want to see incremental gains, you need to do it consistently, but have a consistent rest and not just push it. Because I feel like there's an urge to. It's like I'm gonna go ham. I'm gonna go to the gym 6 days a week, and I'm just gonna be a rat, and then I'll be big and swollen. but that you always flame out. You never. It's hard to keep that up. You can't do that all in right from the start.
Yeah, it's a recipe for blowing your pec off. So don't do that.
Awesome. So I think this is a good place for us to take our break as we head into the unpaid advertisement, and then we'll get into the second half of the episode. All right, here we go. Hey guys, we just want to take a quick moment and thank this week's unpaid advertiser, which of course is the exercise hip thrusters. Now, you guys have probably seen hip thrusters if you've gone to any gym in America in the past 3 years. You've seen young women, old women on the Smith machine doing this exercise. Okay, it is unbelievably popular among the women folk. Not sure why. I have absolutely no idea why, but any gym I've ever been to, that Smith machine is being occupado by the thrusters. So we love hip thrusters. Thank you guys so much for not sponsoring this episode or caring about what we're doing here in any manifest way. We really appreciate it. And let's get back into the action with Dr. Foss. All right. Huge thank you to Thrusters, the exercise. So Foss, the unpaid advertiser this week, is the exercise Thrusters. They paid absolutely no money for this show. They don't know we exist, but we just wanted to give them some free airtime. Tell us about Thrusters. What's going on there?
I assume you're talking about the CrossFit exercise where you do a front squat into an overhead press. Would that be accurate? Are we talking hip thrusters where I'm just lifting my ass off the ground?
Hip thrusters on the Smith machine.
Jesus God. It's great for glute development. It's great for developing power and triple extension. And if you're having issues finishing, I strongly recommend the thruster.
Really?
Just for you.
I see the young ladies at the YMCA doing it a lot. They all seem to hog the flat benches. They take the benches over there and create a setup to do their thrusters. I feel like this started maybe like 3 years ago. I'd never seen this before. And now every single Smith machine is purely being used for thrusters. So we love it. Thank you, Smith machine. And for all the work that's being done with the thrusters. They're popular.
You can thank Brett Contreras for that.
Who?
This guy, Brett Contreras, he actually has a machine that he developed specifically for the thruster. He's known as the glute guy.
The glute guy. That's so interesting. I recently saw this thing about the guy who invented the Brazilian butt lift, the BBL.
Yep.
He is like this cult. He's like a folk hero in Brazil because he did a bunch of free cleft palate surgeries for all the favelas. He's like this. Everyone loves him. And he invented the BBL. Like, how great is that?
Yeah. Even more people love him now. So
all over the world. What is your thought on the BBL, Foss, in purely, PG terms?
Me and Kendrick Lamar are all about natural and stretch marks. So, some people need a little support in the glute aspect. More power to you if you got the money and want to pay for it. I don't care. Go live your life. I prefer a little waves through that booty.
That's what I say. But do you think they are like passing? Like whenever I see one, I know right away it's a BBL, right?
I live in Columbus, Ohio. We don't have BBLs. We just got a lot of Pepsi.
Yeah, the BBLs haven't made its way up the Olentangy River into the beautiful city of Columbus yet. Well, they're coming, Foss. The BBLs. I don't see them all that much, but there's a few at the Y. And I just sit and wonder, and I go, physics wise, no way that that is not a BBL. I don't know if I'm supposed to think about that stuff at the Y, but I think we all are thinking it. Everyone at the Y is just looking at each other, working out, doing thrusters, right? We love it. So the second half of the interview, we want to keep on rolling, talking about the same stuff, pretty much. Now, the subject of Olympic performance-enhancing drugs came up in the episode we did on PEDs. Obviously, there's been like a ton of scandals around that with the Russian Federation of Athletes and various other teams. You know, it seems like there's no rooting out these behaviors. What are your take on PEDs in the Olympics?
Do I think they're ever going to go away? I don't. So I think the question you're asking is, are people going to look for a competitive edge? I think that's always going to exist, especially at an international level. The current state of affairs, you have WADA, which is the World Anti-Doping Agency, that is the key regulating body. The Olympic Committee might have their own independent group that kind of tests for that. And I would say it's mostly a reactionary approach. So they're just trying to catch, classic ways that people have doped in the past, and people are probably going to continue to get more and more creative. And so with newer classes of drugs that are just amino acid components and they're not the classic hormones, it might be a little bit harder for them to continue to catch people who are trying to game the system. So it's going to continue on probably forever. I can't think of a reason why it would stop.
That's so interesting. Remember Marion Jones?
I do.
I mean, it's so interesting with professional sports. Like, we create kind of icons out of these people, especially around the Olympics. We're just like, all right, it's that time, everybody. Every 4 years, time to get those national feelings going. Let's all root for the USA again. And, she was such a star and was like the star of that Olympics. And same thing with Lance Armstrong. I mean, I feel like it's like they just crash and burn,
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, I think it all comes down to the public perception. We raise these people up on a pedestal, and I don't know what the motive is on the back end, just to kind of watch them crash. And I think some people like seeing that, so they like watching people just fall into destruction.
That's
To
interesting.
me, right now you have the enhanced games that are coming out that allows for performance enhancing drug in sport. And there's severe backlash from the traditional Olympic committees as well as some of the international bodies around sport, specifically swimming currently. And some people, it's just like, oh, we view sports as a science. We can see what the human body can achieve in that setting. Other people are more purist, and it's all about fairness in a sport. And how can we make, it's the spirit of sport in that environment, which is supposed to be free of performance enhancing drugs. And where do I stand on that? To me, it's like if you're electing to compete in an organization that has rules, you should probably follow it. I understand the motivations. When you're talking about Olympic sports, like most of these athletes are not making any money. There's a very limited number of spots that are funded to provide a livelihood for these athletes, and it's kind of their only opportunity to get sponsorships, endorsements, or create any sorts of livelihood from whatever sport they're performing at. So there's massive incentives in that situation just to do whatever they can to get their gold medal so that they can capitalize it on the back end. And so I just think the incentive system right now kind of sucks. And when you have it that way, people are going to do whatever it takes to achieve at a high level. And so I think they kind of view it from the role model context. Like if we allow, these people just to abuse drugs openly, that is going to encourage other people to do the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, the inner cynic in me, it's all about money again. So if you're essentially pulling eyes away from a tested sport to an untested sport because it ends up being more popular, then people are going to lose money in that setting as well. So I think it's like everything in life, multifactorial.
That was a great use of multifactorial. Good. I mean, what I told you guys at the beginning, he's the real deal. He's super duper smart, you guys. I think it's fun that they finally did it. Every Olympics, there's always that meme that goes around. They're like, let's just let these guys juice and see what humans are really capable of. So that's kind of fun. It's like we're at the Jurassic Park part of the human experience where it's like, screw it. Why not? Why not? Which I appreciate. You know what I mean? Like, I get the purist argument, But I made this point in the show, it's like get rid of the cameras, get rid of all the, make it truly a human judge who is fallible and misses stuff. I feel like a lot of the like sports watching experience in 2025 is this overly judicious like examination of the rules over and over again in super duper slow-mo. It's like, just let the ump missed it. The ump got it wrong. You know what I mean? The challenges, I find them a little insulting if we're not going to let the guys juice, and go crazy. Now, I do have another question unrelated to professional sports, Foss, which is the guys at the gym. What are they taking?
It's all over the place. I mean, the most common thing that people are using right now is just testosterone. I mean, over the past, I'd say since even COVID, the availability of just anabolic agents, specifically testosterone, has increased readily. Over the past couple of years, you're getting more prevalence of something called DECA. So that's nandrolone. What ended up happening, and this all kind of stemmed from the 1950s, there was this competition between Russia, Germany, United States, who could create the best anabolic agent. So it was kind of like the best version of testosterone. So testosterone has kind of two functions. One's called an anabolic effect, which is muscle building or growth, and another one called androgenic, which is male secondary sex characteristics, deepening voice, male pattern hair loss, sex drive in that too. And so they were trying to create a perfect drug that really only focused on the anabolic aspect, so put on muscle mass. And even within the past couple of weeks, there's a company out there that put out something called a myostatin inhibitor. So there's this bull that's just jacked out of its freaking gourd, and it had a genetic mutation that inhibited this. So it's a peptide agent, does kind of the same thing, and they're like, it's finally here. We're going to be able to have unlimited muscle mass in human beings. The trial looked like shit, if you ask me. I didn't think it was, I thought it was significantly less effective than testosterone for this early product. There's other people academically who think it's like the next generation for performance enhancing drugs or anabolics. I'm not there yet, but we'll just kind of have to see. Do I think gym bros are using that? Hell no. Your average gym bro, they're drinking protein, taking creatine, and they think creatine is testosterone, and it's not.
Let us talk about pre. Should we be taking pre-workout?
When you got two kids and you're sleep deprived, hell yeah, I should be taking a pre-workout because you need anything you can just to get to the gym. Most pre-workouts, it's just caffeine. So they add other things in there, beta-alanine. Sometimes they're going to add a shit ton of vitamin B12. Sometimes they'll add niacin, so you get a flushing effect. Some of them have creatine in it. So the most common ingredient and the one that probably matters the most is just caffeine. Do I think there's really an advantage between drinking a cup of coffee and taking a pre-workout? I don't. But some of these other things potentially have additional benefit.
I loved taking pre when I was heavy lifting and just like waiting for the pre to kick in, where it's like, come on, drugs, let's start working. And then you're like, lightweight. It's really fun, getting super into powerlifting. I wasn't even super into it. I remember we did like this thing called Built for Bad. It was 5x5. It was like you do the same workout 5 days, and it's like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then we like did that for like, I don't know, 12 weeks, 5 months, whatever it was. And then we upped it up to like a strength, like a real bodybuilding hypertrophy, like heavy, and then also tons of reps. We did it 2 days, and I was like, dude, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done. And I wasn't built for it, dude. I'm not built like that. I'm a little baby. If I wanted to start to get huge, or like if I took test, what would that be? A shot? Would I take a shot in my butt?
There's multiple different forms of testosterone. The most common one is injectable. There's orals. You have troches, which is just kind of like a little thing that you put in your mouth. Pellets, where you stick more or less a trocar, which is like a big needle into someone's back and just kind of slide pellets into their flank, which is just in their back fat. And it'll go out over time.
Into their flank?
into their flank. You got gels, patches. So there's multiple different types of testosterone that you can take.
Foss, did you know that I suffer from vasovagal syncope? Did you know that?
Sounds like you need some pellets in your flank.
I would I would pass out within a second, dude. You know what? I feel really bad. The continuous glucose monitors, you know those? You see, like people have them on their tricep.
I am
That
familiar.
you are familiar, yes. I'm like, have you ever heard of those? And you're
Yes,
like,
I
yeah,
have.
yes. I feel bad saying this, but those make me queasy. I see those and I like can't. I have to like look away because I feel like I will pass out, bro. It's not nice. Whenever I feel so bad because the person's obviously trying to like better themselves, and I'm just like, you freak. So yeah, whatever technology, it's good. So last question, Foss. Last question: should PEDs be legal or illegal in your opinion?
Yeah, so they already are, I mean, legal, they already are. I think the question you're asking is should we have it in sport? My
Yes.
opinion is generally yes,
Mm-hmm.
especially when it comes to sports that I consider combat sports or collision sports. So, football, boxing, MMA, like any striking sport, I do think there's more risk when you're just getting an increase in power development that can cause damage to another human being.
Mm.
When it comes to sports like powerlifting, whether you're not a human impacting another human being, my opinion is who cares? Because there's not really a striking or collision involvement in that. Um, I tend to have more of a, do whatever you want kind of mindset, and it should be monitored.
Mm.
So, um, people are going to do people things. I generally recommend if you're going to make some of those decisions, getting professional monitoring just to make sure you're not completely destroying yourself in that environment.
That's a great answer, and this has been an awesome interview. D. Foss, the Biggity Boss, thank you so much, my friend. I'm sure we'll have you back in the Sports Idiot studio in the Sports Idiot shed in no time. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. I'm going to send you a CGM in the mail today.
A CGM, what's that?
Continuous glucose monitor, the thing
Oh,
that makes you
God,
pass
oh,
out.
God, oh, God, oh, God. All right, Foss, you're the man. Thanks, buddy. So, you guys, that was our conversation with Dr. Dan Fosselman about the use of performance-enhancing drugs in sports. I, of course, am filming this part before I've done the interview, so how about that one thing that happened? I couldn't believe that. And then that other thing that just came out of absolutely nowhere. I was like, what? Thank you guys for tuning in. We got another hot episode coming up next month. It's softball, one of my all-time favorite sports. So we hope you guys will join us. That was the Sports Idiot, and I am your host, Johnny Disco. I did that backwards. I'm Johnny Disco, and that was the Sports Idiot. Bye.